Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord. We're a group of like-minded people using John Vervaeke's work to cultivate wisdom, meaning, and communitas. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. And if you're new to us, you'll find a link to the Discord in the notes. And if you want to ask your own questions, you'll have to join the Discord to do so. My name is Brett, and now I'm pleased to welcome John Vervaeke here once again to answer your questions. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, Brett. Pleasure to be here.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to start off with a question from Alexandra Zachary. She writes,
Oh,
yes, and oh, go ahead. Yeah, she does a lot of great stuff for us here in the Discord.
yeah. I'm becoming more and more aware of Alexandra.
That's awesome, and I know she'll be tickled to hear that. She writes, "Hi, John. So grateful for your time and energy. We've been chatting on here about art as a psychotechnology and forming a clearer picture of that in congruence with your definition. And the discussion is continuing, which is exciting. If the psychotechnology of literacy affords the ability to experience texts, is making art the psychotechnology? So that the experience of art is not? Can a second-hand, so to say, experience be considered a psychotechnology in itself? Certainly, viewing a painting, watching, or listening to a performance can be transformative the way reading a book can be. But the doing of art is a different kettle of fish. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm also considering trying to adapt, morph, mutate the philosophical fellowship circling practice to approaching artwork rather than using a text, to maybe expand and explore these ideas. Do you think that's valuable? And do we have your blessings to experiment? Lots of love."
You always have my blessings to experiment, but you don't need my blessings. I think the idea of doing philosophical fellowship on a piece of art as opposed to a text is a really cool idea. I would love to see how that works. By shifting over to the emphasis of the perspectival and off of the propositional, that would be a very powerful thing to do. I don't know how you'd have to modify it, right? As you can't do the ruminatio, but perhaps something else could take that place of the chanting. That sounds really cool. About art as a psychotechnology, I don't know. The thing about art is it seems to lack some of the properties of psychotechnologies. Psychotechnologies are usually socially generated and standardized techniques that can be widely and almost equivalently disseminated amongst a population, a general population, literacy, numeracy, mindfulness practices, etc., and generally enhance cognition overall. Now, whereas I think art does have the capacity to do that, I don't think that art is socially generated as a standardization. In fact, art seems to be much more about, playing between standardization and innovation in important ways. Yeah, I don't think that art uh, sits as a psychotechnology in the way I'm trying to use the term. um, what I find interesting about art is that art, and especially when art is used as a practice, like it's an art as opposed to a science. Um, Art is very interesting because it sits between the arbitrary and the algorithmic, and therefore it is generally associated with ill-defined problems and novel and complex situations. Um, and so I think art is a broader category. I think art is something like the category that rationality is. It describes an overall way in which we can deal with um, a pervasive problem. Rationality dealing with self deception, intelligence dealing with relevance realization, combinatorial explosion, and art having to deal with the fact that many problems are ill defined and fall between being they can't be solved in an arbitrary fashion and they can't be solved in an algorithmic fashion, like the art of conversation, an art I'm particularly interested in right now. I don't think a dialectic, sorry, I don't think the dialogos is a psychotechnology. I think dialectic is a psychotechnology, but it's an interesting one because it's not directly productive of dialogos. What it does as a psychotechnology is prepare conditions that improve the chance that the artistry will take shape. Um, so I think art has some very important relationships to the selection and creation and modification of psychotechnologies, but I think it's of a higher order than psychotechnologies, and I think fundamentally more important. The work I've been doing in this series with Brendan and with Layman is about the like trying to get a richer account of the role of art in the cultivation of wisdom in the religion that's not a religion, and also some of the work that Rachel Hayden is undertaking. I think some of it here on the Discord is also directed towards that. So, like I said, I don't think it's correct to think of art as a psychotechnology, because I think that would be a category mistake. I think it's lacking some of the important features of a psychotechnology, and it's in some sense more important. It's a higher order thing, like rationality or intelligence, rather than a specific psychotechnology like literacy or numeracy or mindfulness or the scientific method, etc.
Right, and
I hope that was helpful.
and Alexandra and Rachel last month had a well attended meeting on art and its practice as a psychotechnology, and I think they're going to be doing it again. I think next week, so we'll be posting an announcement when that's coming up. So stay tuned, everyone,
Great.
for that.
I think that's really important work. I think that's really important work.
So Garrett just wanted to me to let you know that he's deeply thankful for everything you've done, and so just passing that on.
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. Um, it's always helpful to say that. Things are sort of ratcheting up for me in terms of people's interest in my work. And so I'm going through another round, especially after the trip to the UK. Another round of, I feel like, sort of more exposed, and sort of getting the encouragement is very helpful right now. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Nervure. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. You have a
It's a
question for John.
complicated name. No worries. Hi, John. It's a pleasure to speak with you again. I would just like to say
Hi.
that you've created a magnitudinal change in my life with the work, everything you've been doing with Neoplatonism as of late that I can never offer due to. So I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't want you to respond to that. But just know that I'm very, very grateful to all the work that you've been doing with that. So here are my questions actually surrounding Neoplatonism. So what distinguishes Neoplatonism from traditional Platonism? I suspect that in traditional Platonism, that it's often been interpreted when Plato summons the good and the forms in his writing as merely gesturing for lack of a better alternative to a vacant transcendent space that one simply guesses is there, as compared to finding oneself in a more visceral, lived through carnal sense of it, which I believe that Neoplatonism is trying to do. That's at least my sense of it. So as an extension of that, what does it mean for the good to be shown in its radiance when we step towards it in our journeyed flight to the in itselfness of it? And how are we meant to grasp that radiance and not compromise its absoluteness? Because an image or perception of it is relative, and the sense becomes a self-contained appearance. When we
Yeah.
move beyond appearances, what are we seeing in the really real good? Are we seeing the intentionality that it offers, its directedness? Are we existentially grasping it when we are moved into its precincts? Again, I'd like to relate this to the transition from traditional Platonism to Neoplatonism, and I'm asking this to sort of invoke a new manner of seeing being. And this is heavily influenced by everything you've been doing with Daniel Zaruba,
Yeah.
Johannes Niederhauser, James Schofield, and through the books that you've recommended as of late with D.C. Schindler's Critique of Pure Reason, which I'm on chapter 4 of right now. And I've also finished Merleau-Ponty's Last Vision as well. And I bring up
Yeah.
Merleau-Ponty in this kind of strange sense because I've been finding a very strange thing in that book, Last Vision, mainly that it seems as though Merleau-Ponty is using the invisible to gain access, to gain active access into the one, which seems highly similar to the vision that is derived from the good in Plato. So again,
Yeah.
I'd like so So I'd like to hear an account of Neoplatonism, and I'd like to know how are we meant to work our way into the precincts of the good.
Wow. Wow. That was an extremely cool question.
Thank
I'm
you.
just sort of savoring the question. Just some comments on the last part of the sort of the addendum to your question. I think you're right. I think you're right in Lowe's book, and that Merleau-Ponty is sort of recovering a kind of phenomenological Platonism in his work, and that's not foreign to Husserl. There's a Platonism clearly running through Husserl, and I think Merleau-Ponty is bringing it out. And I'm very much working with Daniel and Johannes to try and bring um, the forms into a practice, the practice of eidetic induction. So everything you said around that, I share that. I share that insight that you just shared, and I think for me that, that promises to alleviate one of the most powerful criticisms directed against Platonism, which is that it's abstract, and as an abstract thing, it can't have any causal powers. But if we bring the forms, for lack of a better term, into the very structures of eidetic induction, the actual constraints of our cognitive and perceptual sense making, and I think that criticism can be directly alleviated, while also providing people with a way of experiencing Platonism as a living practice rather than as a theoretical framework. So I just wanted to say all of that.
Wow. Wow,
Just
that's bang on. Just to comment, because Merleau-Ponty, your comments about Husserl are 100%, because Merleau-Ponty is trying to work past this kind of Cartesian framework of reconstructing and retracing and recalling the things that we experience, as compared to actually being within the transitory phase of our
yeah,
experience, and like actually kind of like savoring it, and like being in that the active cocoon of being in the constantly on the move being.
yes, I
Um,
think that's exactly right, and that's why I would put it to you that D.C. Schindler's work about the hermeneutics of beauty and appearance as the disclosure of reality, and the absolute, right, the absolute having both the relative and the absolute within it, so that the
wow.
appearances, right. So we have to give up the hermeneutics of suspicion, right, that appearances distort and distract us from reality. They, of course, can do that. And what I mean by give up the hermeneutics of suspicion, I don't mean give it up completely. I mean give up prioritizing it. This is Merleau-Ponty's critique, right? It runs all the way through the phenomenology. It runs all the way through the last writings, right? The visible and the invisible. That you can only point to something as an illusion, or right, or as a delusion when by pointing to something else that you take as more real. Merleau-Ponty hammers that point again and again and again. Illusions, perceptual or cognitive, are not standalone phenomena. They are
Right.
always, invariably and invariantly dependent on the disclosure of realness, the hermeneutics of beauty. And I think D.C. Schindler's idea that we have to recover the priority of the situation in which appearances disclose reality rather than distort or distract us from it. I think that's actually just deeply crucial, and I think this is actually fair to attribute to Plato because of the way beauty plays such a central role in the Platonic ascent. For example, as found in the Symposium, right? Beauty there is constantly leading you to a new depth, and that there's beauty there that leads you to a depth beyond it, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So I think all of that is coming together in a very, very powerful way. And I think it's directly relevant to awakening from the meaning crisis, because one of the factors running through the meaning crisis, right, which thwarts thwarts the attempt, right, to get connection, to get intimacy, is a prioritization of the hermeneutics of suspicion. That has to do with
Wow.
historical reasons. So all of that. So first of all, that was the penumbra, the beautiful penumbra around your essential question. But I
Yes.
hope that answers some of it. I want to now go to the heart of your question, if that's okay.
Yes,
Um,
please.
so well, I want to be very careful here. I don't think we can recover traditional Neoplatonism. You can't do a Neoplatonism that ignores the history of nominalism, ignores the scientific revolution. We can't do that. So I want to be very clear that I'm not just trying to recover ancient Neoplatonism. I'm trying to exact it. I'm trying to inventio. And that's why Merleau-Ponty is playing such a pivotal role in this kind of adaptation and this transfer. I think how Neoplatonism differs from traditional Platonism is there's a couple of important dimensions, and it goes directly to what I just said, and we have to do something analogous to it, which is Neoplatonism incorporates Aristotelian science into the spiritual program that of anagoge as outlined by Plato. That is a very crucial move. Now, we can't do that. This is part of what I just said. We can't do that because we can't comprehensively re-enter the Aristotelian scientific framework. Can in places and in parts, for example, in aspects of 4E cognitive science, ultimately we need to incorporate something like our current science into the Platonic spirituality of anagoge. And that is what I'm trying to do by trying to really connect phenomenology and intelligibility more deeply together. And so I'm trying to understand. That's why I keep hammering on the question as but what is the ontological ground of science? What makes science actually possible? And if we can understand that, can we integrate that with Platonic anagoge in a way that's analogous to the way Aristotelian science was integrated with Platonic spirituality, Platonic anagoge? One of the ways of doing this is to pick up on one of the key moves that the Neoplatonists made, which is the deep identification of the good from the Republic with the one of the Parmenides. And this is the radical innovation that the good that Plato is pointing to is the process, principle, and ultimately the ineffable source of oneing, of integration, of coming into an existence that is as a gestalt to it, that is above and beyond just the additive collection of its parts. And I think that is very, very crucial. And here's a proposal I have. The way we can take that notion, that ancient Platonic notion of oneing, and make a space for current science is in terms of the rapidly growing importance of dynamical systems theories and the properties of self-organization and moving through things like a state space, which is the state space is so similar to the nous of Neoplatonism. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but that's so right. Integration of science and spirituality was one of the defining features of Platonism. Identifying the good with the one is a defining feature, but we need to bring our current science in, and I'm proposing replacing a static notion of the principle of oneing with something like that is
Yes.
more analogous to what's happening in dynamical systems theory.
Yes, I use the phrase that we are the tectonic plates that are kind of constantly on the move, constantly shifting, and we can find ourselves, we can get into that and understand how we are that and not merely be in that static. So I just want to say, John, this is the first time in my life that I felt like I've been a part of the story of philosophy and not merely a spectator in it. So, and that's because of you. So thank you.
Well, that is more important than anything I just said. The fact that you have homed in both senses of the word, homing in on and a place of home within, right, the philosophical tradition, and you're able to take it up in the here and now. That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I've been amazed how like the response, the proposal I've been making of the reinventio of Neoplatonism as the courtyard of dialogos as opposed to the courtroom of debate, the hermeneutics of beauty. They're like when I was in the UK and talking, this is really resonating with so many people. I'm getting so many comments on it, and what you just said is also that. And this is very, very powerful. I could talk at length about this. So many things are converging around this right now in a really powerful way.
All right, thanks for that. Bauer, you have a question for John.
Hey, Chris, if you're still listening. I'm relatively new to this realm of thinking, even, and I don't consider myself to be heavily involved in the philosophical or intellectual realm. I started off meditating as a way to sort of come to understand a little bit more about why I was thinking the way I was thinking and why I was so anxious about the world, and just to get in touch with my own thoughts. And so I've been doing a meditation practice now for about 2 years, and I only recently started incorporating metta as taught by you through YouTube.
Right.
And my question is, I was hoping you could talk more as to what it was that kept you motivated and going for your own meditation practices for such a long period of time, an extended period of time. And if you could talk about the importance, necessity, or use of having a mentor or a guide in these matters, if it's important to seek out, if it's necessary, if you would recommend it. That's my question.
Excellent question, Bauer. And please don't misinterpret the last exchange. In the end, and I think this was coming out with Niver, the theory is always for the sake of theoria. It's always for the sake of contemplation. It's always for the sake of something that you can put into practice, train attention and reflection, etc. And so your question is very appropriate. What kept me going? Well, one of the things that kept me going was, first of all, that I was taught an ecology of practices. That's where I got the idea from, where metta and vipassana and tai chi chuan were integrated together. Why that helps is, first of all, that really improves the ability for each to constrain and correct the other. And notice how you get a contemplative practice with metta and a meditative practice with vipassana, and then you get a moving practice with tai chi chuan that it corrects for the preponderance of being still and seated within vipassana and metta. So you can see all these opponent processes of self-correction and constraint going on, and mutual affordance. You get insight from one of these that transfers readily to the other and helps it going. And often one of the practices is more interesting than the other two, or two of the practices are more interesting than one of the practices. I mean, this can be for various contextual reasons. It could be having to do with where we're making progress. Can do with the fact that you might be going through a phase where you're reflecting on maybe doing Lectio Divina as another practice on the Tao Te Ching, which is a Taoist text, and that may sort of resonate more with the Tai Chi Chuan or similar type things. For me, what keeps me going is an internal dynamic. They correct and afford each other. They are differentially responsive to context and for therefore motivating you in powerful ways. And then what also kept me going was the feedback I got from people other than myself, which I think is more important, on how these practices were transforming me and my interactions with the world. And so that was also very helpful and very encouraging. Now, that leads to your second question, and it has to do with what I've been talking about recently around the guru gap. So this is the problem we face, which is a lot of this. I'm going to sneeze. Sorry. I think I am. Sorry. So a lot of what I just said earlier about art that's falling between. I sneeze again. I'd love to see. This is very odd. Oh, if I sneeze, I sneeze. But art falling between the arbitrary and the algorithmic. So you can't capture it in a rule book. You can't just let people intuitively guess. And so all of these things, right, so far as we're using them to cultivate wisdom, require artistry. And artistry is usually acquired through apprenticeship. That's the main function of the guru. Guru is supposed to be the form of instruction and teaching that is appropriate to where art is central. You have to apprentice. And so the function of the guru is therefore in an artful way to translate any system or text into the specific case of the student. This is analogous how we have judges to interpret the law, because if we tried to make the law totally algorithmic, then it would be cruel. It would not be able to take into account the complexity, the dynamics of individual lives. And we certainly wouldn't want to replace the law with arbitrary power. We're seeing what that is doing in the world continually, and it's a disaster. So the way traditions have often focused on solve this problem is by creating something analogous to the judge, guru, that helps, interpret, contextualize, apprentice. The problem is that function is indispensable. I would even probably argue that it's necessary that function be filled. Problem is we have lost the ability to trust individuals who take up that role because of the prevalence of charlatans, bullshitters, exploiters, bad faith actors, manipulators, all kinds of sexual crime.
People who just want to make money.
People that just want to make money. So we're caught. This is why I call it the guru gap. We can't do without the function. We don't want anybody to take up that role, and so I'm hoping that we can get groups of people that are constantly practicing self-correction for self-deception because of their ability to engage in dialogos, take over the function, the individual function of the guru, and provide guidance and reflection for people engaging in ecologies of practices. That, of course, is very much promissory. It's very much a work in progress. Just done another workshop with Guy and Chris. It went extremely well by both objective report measures and objective measures of attrition, repetition, things like that. So there's good reason and good evidence to believe this is a real possibility. I still don't know this will be good enough for filling the guru gap. The other thing I could then ask you is, to seek out a mentor, and there's some very good rules of thumb to look at, which is, are they more interested in the practice than themselves or you? Is there any evidence of exploitation? How much of it is focused on them? How much devotion do they require? So these are things you can ask as a heuristic. Some people try to get 2 or 3 gurus trade off against each other, so they're actually moving towards the Logos proposal. So I'm sorry, Bauer. I'm really trying. I really get the problem, and I've tried to articulate it clearly back to you. I'm giving you some sort of practical things you can try right now, and then a promise that maybe something I'm working on will help to address the guru gap, will capture the functionality without falling into its typical failures.
Oh, if anything, you've shed some light on how lucky I am. I recently took up an Okinawan form of karate as a practice. This was only, I believe, 2 months ago, and I've been warned by a few people exactly what you were talking about, the sort of lack of authentic teachers that are out there, and how much of the martial arts world has been taken over by charlatans, as you call them, and I've been wary of this teacher, but I've paid attention to him, and I've tried to figure out where his motivations lie, and he came on a personal recommendation of someone I do trust, and so I actually think that I've been very lucky to find someone who has dedicated himself to karate as the martial art and is not simply doing it for a business. And through this short spurt of relationships that we've been having, I've come to realize just how powerful the mentor role is. And so the relationship that we have, like, just the beautiful dynamic of him testing and me succeeding, or him correcting and me adjusting and pushing forward, even in such a short period of time, gives me such hope for the not only my physical abilities growing in this process, but also my understanding of what a relationship of a true teacher is developing from it. And I hope that I get to the point where I am able to replicate that with people in the future, because I can already feel myself just flourishing, and it's only been 2 months, and it's a beautiful feeling. And so I hope that I can find maybe one is enough. I don't know, but I would love to have someone in a similar role for my more for the contemplation practice and for the insight practice of meditation. So maybe you're right. Maybe groups are the way to go, and I should reach out and connect with more people in this community, because it is still new to me. So I will try that. And thank you for the rest of your answer.
And thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that.
And thank you, Bauer, for being here. Just so you know, and you can check our calendar. I'll try to post a link in the event text. At various times in the day, we meet to meditate, and different groups are meditating and then discussing the meditation afterwards, or the contemplation. So there's lots of opportunities to discuss this stuff here on the Discord. And if you want to start a discussion, if you have a particular topic that you want a discussion and just get a group discussion going, well, you can either just go into a voice channel, or you can talk to me, and we can schedule an event to have a more formal discussion on the topic. So thank you for that. LOK asked,
I want to say a bit more, Brett.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I say a bit more, please?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, there's a couple things to. I mean, I think Bauer pointed out your sense of artistry in a potential mentor. That you I can't give you a definition of that, but when somebody is an artist, you should have a sense of artistry. That they're offering you something that's philosophical, not in the intellectual sense, but as a way of life, cultivation of wisdom. Science should play a significant role in their life, because science is the best thing we have for getting rid of the charlatans and the frauds and the bullshitters. So anybody that wants to take you away from science, or cloud your relationship to the scientific understanding of mind and body, that for me would be a big red flag to definitely pay very strong attention to.
Thanks for that. LOK asks, what is the ontological reality of the eidos? Is it only a phenomenological or experiential reality? How does the eidos fit into a continuous process ontology? We are familiar with aspects, properties, and their ontology, but what is the ontology of a through line? And if you could, John, just briefly describe what ontology and eidos means.
And what a through line is.
And what a through line is, yes.
And this goes towards the earlier discussion I had about Merleau-Ponty. Ontology is the study of the structure of being. It has to do basically with how we determine if things are real. It has to do with what are called the transcendentals, with goodness and beauty. What do they have to do with realness? But that's the fundamental nature of ontology, the study of being, and it involves primarily our judgments about realness and reality. Is reality one, monism? Is it multiple, plural, the one and the many, things like that. The eidos, this is one of the primary terms in Plato's philosophy, often translated as form, but it's sometimes translated as idea. It doesn't translate well as either form, because the Greeks have a separate word for form, morphe, or as our current concept of an idea. The eidos is the structural functional integration makes something intelligible to us, but also makes it a causal whole. That we can talk about it having causal powers that pertain to it as a whole and not to its component parts. Oh, when we're talking about the eidos, though, we're not talking about ultimately, not excluding, but this would only be the lowest level. But ultimately, in Plato's sense, we're not talking about a spatial integration of parts into a whole. We're talking about a integration of different ways in which we make sense of things, such that they all make sense together and have an impact on our understanding of them, presumably point to the way in which reality is also organized. So the basic idea of the eidos, the basic claim behind it, is that when we really get clear about the structures that make things intelligible to us, we are also getting clear about the structures that make things exist. How does that fit in a process ontology? Well, I mean, a good example of how this could potentially work, and somebody who basically turned into a Neoplatonist, was Whitehead, one of the great proponents of a process ontology. And what Whitehead noted, and this you can see how this is deeply related to my notion of a through line, so just hang on for a sec, but this will become clear. What Whitehead noted is that things do not come into actuality when in a disorganized way. Moment to moment, there is a order to things. So progression of time only discloses more and more intelligibility. Whitehead therefore concluded that there must be a structure possibility. There must be a real structure to possibility. And for him, that was his interpretation of the Platonic forms. So the Platonic forms represent the constraints on how things can unfold, real structures. And so a strong instance, but not the only kind of instance of this, non-deflationary account of a scientific law, I think, by the way, is the right account of a scientific law. Something like E equals mc squared is not an event, it's not a spatial-temporal location, is a way in which reality is structured so that as events unfold, they unfold in a principled, predictable manner. And in that sense, E equal mc squared is a kind of eidos. Now you see what it is? It's a through line through events. The events lead into each other. And this was one of Whitehead's greatest concern. He wanted to explain what he called prehension, how the past is retained in the present is is affording of the future. There has to be some through line through these events that binds them all together. And just invoking time is just to circle the question back on itself. And so there's a through line in the reality. This is physis, that there's a continuity of things. There's a self-organization to things. There's a harmony of things that points towards principles that are the real structuring of possibility. What turned Whitehead into a Neoplatonist is he said those principles have to exist in something like a mind in order to give them the dynamic actualization they need. And so he basically, that's how he got his God. God is the mind that holds all the eidos. It's very much like the Neoplatonic position of Plotinus. Whether or not that thing should be called a mind is, of course, something that Neoplatonists like Pearl and others and myself really argue about, but I'll put that aside. So the through line is this idea within phenomenology. Well, I developed it from Merleau-Ponty. He doesn't use that term, but I use it. Where it's better pick up an object and just move it around, and also imagine it in different interactions, and you realize that it has an unlimited number of aspects. It's multi-aspectual, but those aspects are coordinated. They have a oneness. They belong together. But that oneness is not just a simple sort of identity. It's a through line that's running through them. This is the eidos. Now Husserl thought you could get that to sort of completion. Merleau-Ponty said was constantly unfolding. I agree with Merleau-Ponty, and now I'm going to try and bring these two things together. There's a through line in the real creativity of reality that points to the presencing of the principles of possibility, the eidos. There is a through line in our phenomenology. And the through line is not itself another aspect. It's what binds all aspects together, both perceptual and conceptual, but it's not itself any aspect. Through line that goes through the the changes of objects is not itself another object. As I said, it's how probability is really structured and acts as an ongoing constraint. And the claim I'm making is phenomenological through line in that you get from Merleau-Ponty, and the ontological through line you get from Whitehead, and because they both are feeding off the Platonic tradition, are actually two sides of the same coin. They're two sides of the same coin. The realization of the through line in phenomenology is afforded by and instantiates and points to the through line of realization running through what we call process. Process is to point to a through line that is not a thing, it's not another thing, but it's what binds things together. So I think there's deep convergence between the phenomenology of the eidos and the ontology of the eidos. I hope that answered your question. I think that's a really important question. That's exactly what I'm trying to do right now, but again, not just at a level of ontological or phenomenological theory, but in terms of real practice, like the practice of eidetic induction, and then other practices around, if you'd gone to the workshop, for example, Neoplatonic contemplation. So, excellent question. That's the best answer I can give to it right now.
Thank you. Fanny asks, what is the difference between man and woman? Is this difference also a complementarity? And is not this complementary difference between man and woman the most glaring and important instance of the unity of opposites, of the oneness of the many, which is the essence of being? If it is, are we quite effed in trying and pretending to eradicate this difference? See this article by D.C. Schindler, Perfect Difference, Gender, and the Analogy of Being.
Yeah, I haven't read that article, but if it's written by Schindler, that means it's worthy automatically of deep respect. I mean, I haven't felt like this about a thinker, D.C. Schindler, in a long time. The last person was Nishitani, Religion and Nothingness. But D.C. Schindler, everything I read by coming into the presence of a mind that is just incredibly astute and so incredibly comprehensive and so carefully rigorous while being eloquent is just, it's humbling. It's deeply humbling, but also deeply affording. I'd need to read the article because I don't. Oh, I want to say this. I don't know what to do with that distinction right now. The masculine and the feminine. I mean, is it the most fundamental? Parent and child is also a fundamental relation, and that's different than masculine and feminine. Relationship between the generations, I think, is in fact maybe more important for culture. That's a point that Zach Stein makes in his work on intergenerational transfer. And of course, cultural ratcheting is our primary adaptation. We don't have to learn anything from scratch. We can always rely on how things have been passed from generation to generation. So I'm not sure that the masculine and feminine is the primary difference. I'm not sure how to answer that question about what is the difference between them. Like I said, I think other differences like parent and child are as important, if not more important. I think the differences between being and becoming, Plato, are fundamental. So I understand that there's a certain priority given to it in Jung, and his claim that within every individual there's a masculine and feminine aspect. Again, I don't know. I don't see the arguments why that gets prioritized over being and becoming, or over parent-child. We have an inner child and an inner parent. You can certainly see that in both Jung and Freud. So I'm not clear about that. and it often gets mapped into more comprehensive categories in other cultures. Yin and yang is feminine, yang is masculine, but yang is way more than masculine, and yin is way more than feminine. Um, so I'm not clear how comprehensive or universal it is. Oh, again, I'm ignorant of that particular article by Schindler, and I would ask your forbearance that after reading it, might significantly change what I'm about to say, because I believe he easily has the capacity to force me into self-correction. Um, so I'm not clear about whether or not the current project experimenting with masculine and feminine and inverting them is as universally disastrous as perhaps Jonathan Pajot seems to argue. Um, Plato was certainly willing to step outside of the ways masculine and feminine were understood in his culture, and to his great credit. Um, and so, again, really hesitant to give any clear answer about this. Um, so, yes, I, I'm guess I'm unconvinced about the centrality of this. I don't deny its existence. That's not what I'm challenging. I'm challenging is the claim that it has a kind of priority um, that overrides these other dichotomies. That's the part that I haven't seen convincing argument for. Um, of course, our sexuality makes that difference potentially important to us, but I really do believe in sexuality that transcends typical understandings of masculinity and femininity, and so I don't know. I mean, I really don't know how to give a clear answer to that because of the concerns I've raised, um, and I do sympathize with an important aspect of the critique you're making, that Jonathan's making, which is lack of clarity on this, and the generation of a lot of confusion hiding behind claim of genuine reflection and exploration. I think that critique is something I can definitely get behind. I think, given the reasons I've just mentioned a few minutes ago, talking about exploration and reflection and philosophical challenge to standard notions of masculine and feminine, I think that's completely legitimate. Using that as a mask, cover fusion and right and a lack of people in their own lives. That part of the critique, I think, is bang on. I think it behooves us to, if we're going to propose reformulation, we come to something clear, consistent, way that can reliably guide people as they attempt to unfold their lives. And so I think, and this is where Rachel Hayden's work it's such a strong impression on me. Understanding certain processes around sexuality and gender as subsumed under the greater project of conversion into a philosophical way of life cultivating wisdom. I think that's exactly the challenge. In fact, I've taken it almost as a heuristic. If somebody proposes to me a vision of masculine and feminine that does not indicate how it is situated well and clearly within the broader project of transformation, aspirational conversion, the cultivation of wisdom and self-transcendence, then I generally just ignore it, because it's usually doing the thing that the critique applies to. It's usually masking muddle. It's usually covering over confusion. And in that sense, I think it should be rejected. I know that's not the answer you were looking for. You were looking for a definitive answer, and I do not think I have relevant expertise in general and I do not have the expertise of reading the particular argument by Schindler. I do want to read it and understand it better. I suspect that he does argue for a kind of a deeply interdependent complementarity, since that's generally how he handles any of the other dichotomies that I talked about, such as the one between being and becoming, appearance and reality, um, the virtuous and the non-virtuous. Um, so uh, that was a bit of a rambling answer. I tried to clean it up and get clear as much as I could. Um, I hope you at least found it something to reflect upon.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left. I'd like to try to squeeze in two questions that we didn't get to last week, so apologies for that, but we'll get to hopefully Strawn now, and then I'm going to have to skip Ryan and get to Crodlock, because we didn't get to Crodlock last week as well, so last month, so I'd like to try to get to both. So Struan, you have a question for John.
Hi, John.
Hi, Struan. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, you've been giving some really juicy answers to some really juicy questions tonight. I really enjoyed it, and I've actually got a work of art of my own that I'm working on, and with that in mind, do you have a favorite name by any chance?
Favorite name? What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, a favorite name. Just
A name I really
yeah.
Oh, you mean like a name of a person, you mean?
Yeah, or well, whatever your favorite name is. It doesn't have to be a person, but a person's probably the most likely.
I really like but my reasons are idiosyncratic. I don't have the general.
Perfect.
I really like Sophia for obvious reasons, but I really like the name Sarah. I really like the name Sarah a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you very much.
Persian for princess. I really like it. I find it very beautiful.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much, John.
Strawn. That was very different than your usual question. So it's in fact making a very profound, by contrast, it's making a very profound impression on me. So thank you for that. Making me really reflective. So thank you. That's really cool.
Yeah, well, I'll maybe follow up in a while. But yeah, thank you very much, John.
Welcome.
And it's good to hear you again.
It's good to be here again. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to talk about all the stuff that happened while I was in the UK. But one thing I can say is, whatever it is we're plugged into here as a group, other people are plugging into it around the world, in very powerful ways, and networking with these other emerging communities, I think, is an exciting possibility for really stealing the culture in a profound way. And working with Nader Vanderpool to try and get all these groups of people connected together, create something of a lingua franca. But man, was it exciting. There's a lot happening. I found it deeply, deeply encouraging.
That's awesome. The last question, if we can squeeze it in, from Crodlock.
Sure.
Are you familiar with the extreme forms of philosophical pessimism and or antinatalism that seems to gain ground during the current meaning crisis, especially the most critical and challenging works towards life and vitality, such as Thomas Ligotti's The Conspiracy Against the Human Race? Do you think it relevant to have a discussion about these topics like Jordan Peterson has briefly done with David Benatar?
Yeah, I'd like to be more familiar with that. I mean, I did an earlier version of that, somewhat like Nietzsche, in an earlier part of my life, sort of around Schopenhauer, and the Schopenhauer elements in both Nietzsche and in Kierkegaard. I'm bumping up against it again. Kierkegaard has this tremendous sort of wave of philosophical pessimism that acts as sort of ballast to his Christian optimism, but it's where Kierkegaard can border on being deeply sarcastic in his capacity for criticism, precisely because of that kind of pessimism. But yeah, I do think we need to engage with it. I am trying. I need to engage more directly with the specific thinkers, the more recent ones. I haven't done that. There's only so many hours in a day. I am trying to deal with something that underwrites the pessimism that comes out of, well, out of Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Freud, um, Marx, uh, which is, as I've been talking about it, the hermeneutics of suspicion. I think if the hermeneutics of suspicion is powerfully challenged, I think D.C. Schindler and Christopher Norris Clark and others are doing the best work on this right now. I think when that and of course a little bit older Merleau-Ponty, I think challenging the hermeneutics of suspicion is one of the most powerful ways of wrestling with philosophical pessimism. I'll try and track down that video where Jordan is talking about it. Try and pick up on some of um, more recent authors. Like I said, I've been trying to address an underlying, I think, cultural cognitive grammar, which is the prioritization, the unjustifiable prioritization of hermeneutics as suspicion as what's lying behind pessimism, nihilism, and cynicism in the modern sense of the word. So I need to do more. When I say stuff like that, it's just I always need to do more.
Well, you're doing quite a lot there, John. So we'll give you a break on that.
Well, I don't want. I'm not asking for a break. I do think it's an important point, and and properly proportioning one's attention and living wisely is the ongoing daily challenge. Anyways, if at an abstract dimension, I do take the problem seriously, and I am responding by challenging hermeneutics of suspicion. Not in the place where I have the relevant knowledge or expertise to respond to specific thinkers or specific arguments. Hopefully, I can get to that place in the future.
Well, thank you so much, John. Once again, your answers are amazing as always, and thank you everyone for the fantastic questions. I'd like to invite all of you right after this in the book club channel. Capella is going to be leading a discussion on the second chapter of D.C. Schindler's Plato's Critique of Impure Reason, and next Saturday, the 5th. Alexandra and Rachel will be leading another discussion on art. So please, and we have lots of other events, so please take a look at our calendar, everyone. And if you're not a member of the Discord and watching on YouTube, please join us. Come by, check us out. And yeah, thank you so much.
And thank you, everyone. Good evening.